Hey there, it's me, Nate, and today I just want to talk to you guys about what I've been reading, what I'm going to be reading next, and just what's going on. So, if you remember from last week, I had mentioned and told you guys that I was going to be planning on reading A Wizard of Earthsea, and I did start that. But to be completely honest, it's the first of my DNFs this week, of which I actually have a little bit of a stack of DNFs. Now, as for Wizard of Earthsea, I don't think it's bad. In fact, out of all the books I DNF'd over this past week, I actually don't think any of them are bad, except for two of them. I have two books I thought were bad, but I thought the rest were, okay, or just, not for me. And as for Wizard of Earthsea, I wonder if just, maybe I just prefer more modern science fiction fantasy, or maybe I just don't like Ursula K. Le Guin's style of writing. Because this felt it felt less like a book and more like a story that somebody would be telling, around, a campfire or something like that. The characters in this story don't really feel like characters. They feel like archetypes that are part of a narrative framework than actually characters as part of a moving story. And I never really felt engaged with any of the people or the characters. Ged himself was so typical, spoiled child, or not really spoiled, but arrogant, overconfident child, that grows and becomes more responsible and mature. It's the entire story is kind of like a basis, a framework of so many other stories, that I felt it was a bit predictable, and there wasn't really much of interest for me to garner personally. But I can understand why at the time a lot of people really loved this or were inspired by Earthsea, because just how for example, for those of you who are anime fans, a lot of people in that field are really inspired by the film Akira, and I don't really like Akira that much, but I recognize the cultural impact and the significance of how it inspired other people to then create their own things. And I feel like Earthsea is kind of the same. So no way do I think Earthsea is bad. I just think it's not really for me. But I can recognize its significance and importance. But yeah. So then after that, this will probably also bother even more people. I read and DNF'd The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and this isn't the first time I tried to read The Hobbit or, really try to enjoy the world of Middle-earth, because as a kid, I grew up watching the Lord of the Rings movies, and I didn't like them even as a kid, which is crazy. I watched them a lot with my family because they love those movies. I kind of was just forced to sit through with them. And so years ago, I tried reading The Hobbit, and I really bounced off of it, didn't really care for it. And then this time I tried it again, and I enjoyed it a little bit more, but it's still just not for me. The kind of lyrical prose that Tolkien has, whether it's the songs, the poems, the way characters talk, it just doesn't work for me. It's just, and again, same thing with Earthsea. I recognize its significance and its influence on other authors and creators over the years, but it's just not grabbing me. So I moved on from that. Then this is The Witch's Orchard by Archer Sullivan, and this is a crime novel that takes place in a mountain town, around the Appalachians, I believe. And this started out pretty strong, but I felt as it towards the middle, it started to really meander and really get boring. That's pretty much where I dropped off. And this is it's if you're really into stuff like True Detective, kind of like a crime drama with some light, almost supernatural, paranormal elements, I think you would like something like The Witch's Orchard. And again, another book that I don't think is bad. I think it's okay. It definitely would appeal to a lot of other people. And then I feel really bad about DNFing these books, but I just got to be honest with you guys. So then I read 1984 by George Orwell. Same thing with The Hobbit and Earthsea. I recognize how important it is, but I feel like so many dystopian stories or books take so much from 1984 that it doesn't really, it doesn't, it's, you know, kind of predictable. It doesn't really get to do much on its own because like you've kind of experienced the story so many times before that when you go back to 1984, it's like, oh, well, I've experienced like the Hunger Games, or I've experienced this book or that story or that show or movie that have like taken from 1984, that you're not left with much, because like the characters in 1984 aren't anything to really be impressed by. Like, what's the name? Winston Smith, the main character, you know, he's not anything special. Like, he spends most of the book, you know, just like inner monologuing about like, you know, the party and about Big Brother and stuff like that. You spend most of the story, at least, you know, as far as I got inside of his head, you know, and I know he does interact more with like other characters and stuff, but I found myself a bit bored. Then I read, or, you know, I started Sorceress Comes to Call, and the initial premise had me really interested, but after it kind of like sets up the stage and introduces like the main players, it kind of like just becomes like Downton Abbey or like or a show like that, but in book form, where it is kind of like very much like period piece drama with like very light kind of like, you know, supernatural horror elements with the main, because Cordelia, she is basically, her mother is like a sorceress, and she's basically had to live like this life of abuse and servitude towards her awful mother, and her mother now wants to get married to like a kind of like a rich, you know, like nobleman like out in the countryside, and so she kind of like sets up like this courtship with like this rich nobleman, and this rich nobleman, he has a sister, a spinster, named Hester, and Hester and Cordelia are our two main characters, and they're kind of trying to like work through the situation so that way that they can deal with Cordelia's mother and like, you know, stop her from marrying this nobleman. And like the whole premise starts out initially with like this like intrigue about like how the sorceress controls her daughter, and like that's all very interesting, and like the abuse that she's, you know, she's suffering, and then like she gets like to the nobleman's manor and like they're there, and it kind of becomes just like kind of like a period piece like drama, you know, and it just like, and it has like these horror elements, but I never really found myself engaged enough to like really be frightened for the characters. But, you know, that's just me. Another crime, you know, like detective type story. This is Open Season by C.J. Box, and this is book 1 of the Joe Pickett series. And in this, Joe Pickett, he is the new game warden for this new area after this like legendary game warden retires. I thought it was just fine. Like Joe Pickett, the character will say that he's not a very good shot with his gun. Like in the opening of the book, it starts out with him basically getting embarrassed by like this like poacher at the beginning of the story, and then like, you know, and then people finding out about how he basically, you know, got embarrassed by this poacher. So heck, you know, his reputation takes a lot of damage. So like he's like incompetent at his job, and then like he himself is not like a very interesting character. I didn't get very far in this. He didn't grab me. Like his plight and family drama didn't really interest me. Yeah, it didn't really do much of anything for me. I have 2 more DNFs left, but these ones were a bit special because these were my first ever audiobooks. So for basically my entire life, I've been like a near firm physical only reader with like rare exception. But at my job, I have a lot of time where I might be like by myself, and I was like trying to like think of how I can take more advantage of that time. So I decided to try out audiobooks just so I can try to get more reading done. And so I don't have these, since obviously they're audiobooks, I don't have these physically. So I'll put the cover somewhere here on screen, either on the left or right. But so first off, I tried Sufficiently Advanced Magic. So Sufficiently Advanced Magic is, I think it's like a progression fantasy. I think it's the correct genre term for it. It's not lit RPG because I don't think there's like stats. But I think it's I think it's progression fantasy. And basically, in this world, in the world of Sufficiently Advanced Magic, there are these like these spires that people can go into, and they can like go past like these trials. And as they like ascend the spire, they can gain like abilities or like treasures, and then when they reach the top of a spire, they can be granted a wish by the goddess. So it's, fairly standard. And the main character, Corin, he wants to go make it to the top of the spire so that way he can ask for his brother back. Because 5 years ago, his brother went into one of the spires and he never came back. And so he wants to bring his brother back and like fix his family, basically. Because after his brother disappeared, his family kind of fell apart. So, as far as standards go, pretty standard. Initially, it was kind of, I found it interesting. But as I was going through it, I found Korn to be one of the most insufferable, annoying as hell main characters I've seen in a long time. He is like constantly whining and complaining and over-explaining every single situation. Like anytime there'd be like something, like a situation going on that could be interesting and like, could like really boost the momentum of the story, he's over-explaining, like inner monologuing so much that it totally detracts and just grinds things to a halt, and like it completely reduces all tension. And it just kept on going and going and going like this. Like I was like listening to this for like hours, like thinking like, well, people really like this. Like surely there's something here. No, it's bad. It's nonsense. The prose isn't very interesting. It's just so much over explaining. I remember I was like listening to a chapter and I was like, I feel like if you had just like cut down on how much of his like nonsense whining and inner monologuing there was, you could cut this chapter in half. It feels like a lot of bloat and not very much substance. So yeah, Sufficiently Advanced Magic is very bad in my opinion. And then I listened to He Who Fights Monsters, and this is a lit RPG, has a bunch of stats and stuff like that. And this was also super annoying to listen to. The main character, what's his name? Jason Asano, also an incredibly annoying protagonist. He's constant like the majority this first couple chapters, it's constant like, oh, I must be delusional, I must be in a dream, and it's like, and it's just like that over and over again. And like I'm not against if a person's like transported to another world or like a whole new situation, I can totally understand the whole like what's going on, where am I, those kind of questions are obvious, anybody would ask that. But if you ask that same question over and over again, it gets really tiring really quickly. Because like with the premise of like kind of like a isekai or like another world type story, like me as a reader and you as an author should understand that we have entered into like a pact where I understand what this is about, and you as an author understand that I know what it is about. Like we have a mutual understanding of what this initial setting is about. Like it is a character from our world in another place. Cool, spend a couple pages talking about that, then move on with it. Let's get past it and get into the meat of it. It just doesn't. It just pontificates about nothing for so long instead of just getting on with the story and actually getting into the fun of it. So yeah, I couldn't stand it. I know that was a lot of DNFs. That was 8 of them. But now I can actually move on to what I'm currently reading. So I am reading right now Sabriel by Garth Nix, and I'm about halfway through it, or a bit over halfway. I have 100 and something pages left. It's not super long. And I'm enjoying it so far. This is the first book of the Horson series, or the Old Kingdom series. I think the name of the series is different depending on where you are in the world. And basically, there is Ancelsteer, which is kind of like the newer kingdom, and they have, it has like more technology, but it's separated from the Old Kingdom by the wall. And closer towards the wall, you have more access to magic and things like that. But in the Old Kingdom, they don't have very much technology, but there's a lot more magic. The magic's more powerful. The land is more enriched with magic on that side of the wall. And our main character, Sabriel, she is from the Old Kingdom, but she's been living in Ancelsteer at this girls' academy, like boarding school, for most of her life. But then one day she gets a message from her father, Porson, who, that something has happened to him, or he's gone missing, because he sends her his like magical bells and his sword. And so she sets off on a journey into the Old Kingdom to find him and like figure out what's going on. That's like the basic premise, and I think pretty much all you really need to know to get started on Sabriel. And this is a YA fantasy, and I find it's pretty interesting so far. The first 100 and something pages are mostly like set up and introducing characters. I think it's only now that I'm about halfway through that it's like we've kind of like assembled like our full like party of characters, like our trio of main characters. There's Sabriel, there's Mogget, which is a talking like cat slash like demon, and Touchstone, who is this like mage who was basically turned into like a wooden figurehead for like 200 years, but Sabriel is able to like wake him up, and he's being real shifty about his past and like what he remembers from back then. And so like this is like our kind of like trio of like characters, off on this journey to find a Horson and like figure out like what's going on in the Old Kingdom. And it's pretty engaging so far. I've heard of the Horson series, and I've read I think some of Garth Nix's books when I was a kid. But this is my first time reading any of his stuff as an adult, and I'm really enjoying it. Plan to I should finish this here in the next day or so. I want to have a review out on this hopefully tomorrow, or I think I can get one out by like Friday or so. We'll see. And then the audiobook I'm listening to right now is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. This is the first book in the Bound and the Broken series. I think it's what it's called. This is the name of the series. And this is a Dragon Rider fantasy. So think along the lines of like Aragon, but a bit more mature. And I'm not super far into this. I'm only like a couple chapters in, so I don't really have much to say about it right now. But I am enjoying it so far. Basically, this is just like Aragon, which is just like Star Wars, where there are like these dragon riders and like these like legendary like guards and stuff like that. But then they fell because of the corruption of like certain people of power, and like the kingdom fell, and now there's like this empire. So it is Aragon, which is Star Wars, which is fine with me. A lot of people look down on Aragon because it takes so much from like Star Wars or in other previous stories, but I don't really have that issue personally. It's like as long as the story is like fun and like engaging, I can get past it being really like having grabbed a lot from other stories. Also as long as it has like its own spin, its own take on that kind of thing. But yeah, that's what I'm reading right now. So Sabriel and Of Blood and Fire. I don't really like that title. It doesn't really roll off the tongue. After Sabriel, I plan on reading Unwind by Neil Shusterman, which I am looking forward to. I do like my occasional kind of like dystopian future story, and I do like Neil Shusterman. I've read his Arc of the Scythe trilogy. I read that some years ago, and I really enjoyed that. And I remember growing up seeing the Unwind books like in the school library and stuff like that, but I never read them. And for those who don't know, it's It's this dystopian future where instead of having like things like abortions, once a child passes 13, you can unwind your child, which is basically you take them in and they're kind of just like broken down into like body parts, which can then be like sold or donated to other people and like their kids. So like there are people who are just made out of like unwound parts, or other children who have been partially unwound who need new parts. So it is this kind of like legalized like organ or body part trafficking. And and there's like three, I think in this first book there's like three different POV characters. Yeah, it sounds really messed up. Body type like horror and stuff like that can really bother me. So this one might be a little bit creepy for me. But you know, I think it's good to push out of your comfort zone, you know, to occasionally read things that you're uncomfortable with. And then after of Blood and Fire, I plan on listening to It by Stephen King, which I'm not going to go super into it, but in the town of Derry, every period of time, some span of years, I can't believe I don't remember his name. This killer clown comes, haunts, and like kind of like terrorizes and kills people. But yeah, like that's all I'm listening to and reading to, and all that I've read over the past week. So until next time, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and have a good day.